Sometimes time doesn't pass, it accumulates. It lingers in the corners of the house, trapped in photographs, hidden in the cracks in the floorboards. The clock keeps ticking, it's true, but there's a pain that refuses to move along. And it's precisely on eves, on nights when the whole world seems too busy celebrating, that the ghosts seize the opportunity to return. If a mother says she saw her son disappear 12 years ago, drinking hot chocolate in the living room, is she lying, losing her mind, or is there something in this world we still can't understand? What if the boy had never disappeared, just hidden in the most painful way possible? Sometimes the truth doesn't disappear, it just waits, and when it decides to reappear, it may be too late to pretend it never existed. Sergeant Darren Cole was nearing the end of his shift, Christmas Eve. Traffic was light, the patrol car radio playing a jazzy version of Silent Night. It was supposed to be an easy night, the kind of shift where you hold off until breakfast, go home, and forget the world outside is falling apart. But the call came at 11:08 p.m., a woman's voice, tired but firm. "Officer, my son's back. He's here. I know you won't believe it, but he's here." She gave him the address, Westwood, the old part, a nice, quiet neighborhood, and hung up. Darren didn't argue. He wrote it down in his notebook, straightened his coat, and continued on. He knew it could be another case of Christmas loneliness, the kind that breaks your heart and doesn't make it into any report. But when he pulled up in front of the house, something in him trembled. The lights were on, the door was ajar, and there were 2 mugs of hot chocolate steaming on the coffee table. Only the living room was empty. That's when she appeared, leaning against the doorframe, her eyes brimming with tears and a smile that mixed hope with a long-standing pain. "He's back," she said. "After 12 years, my boy is back." So, should he believe it? Or would it be easier to say that it was all just nostalgia masquerading as a miracle? Because the truth sometimes doesn't knock on the door. It's already sitting on the couch waiting for us to face it. Darren stood there for a few seconds, silent, observing the woman. There was no tremor in her voice, nor the deliriousness typical of someone lost in memories. She spoke calmly. Her gaze, though tired, was clear, direct. She didn't seem out of it. She believed with every cell in her body that her son was there. And the strangest thing, there was a faint scent of cinnamon in the air, and the mugs were still warm. He checked with his hand. This wasn't theater. She introduced herself as Lucia Hernandez. She was a widow, a retired teacher. She had lived alone in that house for almost 20 years. Her son, Milo, had disappeared one ordinary afternoon 12 years ago, when he was only 8. "It was hot that day," she said. "We had gone to the market. He was carrying a bag of apples. He ran into the front door, as he always did, and disappeared, as if the world had swallowed him whole." Darren made a mental note. No police report came to mind with that name, but it had been 12 years. A lot could have gotten lost in the system. He promised to look through the station's files and got back in the car with the feeling he was leaving something behind, and it wasn't just the woman. The next morning, already on the central computer, he typed the name Milo Hernandez nothing. He tried the surname with other common first names. He scoured old cases, missing person reports from the Westwood area, scanned paper files, everything that might yield a clue, but it was as if Milo had never existed. Not a note, not an anonymous tip, not a digital photograph. The boy had disappeared twice, from life and from the paper. That's when Darren began to suspect something bigger. At first, he thought the system had lost the data, but that was unlikely. Even older cases he remembered by heart were still there. Milo wasn't. So he looked in the local newspaper and scoured the municipal library's archives. He read yellowed articles about weddings, neighborhood fairs, and petty thefts, and in the middle of a forgotten society column, he found something that sent a chill down his spine. Mrs. Lucia Hernandez, resident of Sycamore Street, organizes a mass for her son, Milo, who disappeared 3 years ago. The neighborhood comes together in solidarity. Date, December 23rd. 12 years ago. The neighborhood knew, the press knew, but for some reason the case never entered the official record. Back at the woman's house, Darren knocked on the door again. She opened it just as calmly, holding a small spiral notebook in her hands. "He came back last night," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "I think he just came to see me. He didn't sleep here. He said he couldn't." Before Darren could ask, she held out the notebook. It was filled with penned notes. Dates, phrases, lists of what the boy had said or asked for. "He likes bread with butter and sugar, just like when he was little," she pointed out. "He said he missed his toys. He apologized for leaving." Darren flipped through the pages, feeling an unease deep in his chest. Was this delusion or pure resistance to absence? Some of the sentences were too specific, like, "Does the house on the corner still have the dog that bit me?" Or, "I dreamed about your brother's blue truck, the one he promised me when I grew up." Little truths that seemed to have come from a real boy. He decided to investigate the neighborhood. He started with the house across the street, where a woman named Eleanor Whitman had lived for over 30 years. She was reserved but friendly. When he mentioned the name Milo, She stiffened. She said she didn't remember, but as she spoke, her hands trembled slightly. Darren noticed. He thanked her and left without pressing. 2 houses down, a man named Leo, a retired war veteran, claimed to remember the case. The boy did disappear, he said, lighting a cigarette. But everyone preferred to forget because the police never solved it, and the more we talked, the stranger it became. Strange how? Darren asked. Leo hesitated. Other children. They didn't disappear, but they changed. They drew strange pictures. They had nightmares. One stopped talking for months, as if she'd seen something. The investigation began to take a turn Darren hadn't expected. Milo's case wasn't isolated. A cloud hung over that street. Old stories whispered, swept under the rug with the excuse that childhood minds invent too much. But now he knew. It wasn't invention. It was forced oblivion. One silent dawn, he returned to Lucia's house. He asked to see Milo's room. She hesitated. He said no one had been there in years, but eventually she relented. They climbed the stairs slowly. The bedroom door creaked as it opened. Inside, everything was as it was in 2013. A made bed, shelves filled with old toys, clothes folded in the dresser, and photos. Lots of photos. In one, Milo was smiling, holding a red toy car. Darren picked up the image and felt a shiver. The child had the same eyes as the woman, but he'd seen that face before. The next day, he requested access to the local school's archives, and he found a list of students from that time. There it was, Milo Hernandez. 3rd year A. There was even a class photo. Confirmed. It existed. But why did the case disappear from police records? Who erased it? Another clue emerged when he cross-referenced the data with medical records from the time, linked to the school. 3 children in Milo's class underwent intensive psychological treatment in 2013. They all lived on the same street, and all stopped treatment within a year. Darren approached one of them, now a teenager. The young woman, named Riley, hesitated when approached, but when he showed her Milo's photo, something changed. He was talking to someone, she said. Whenever he was alone, it was like he was talking to an invisible boy. We thought he was joking, but one day he told me that the other Milo wanted to take his place, that he was tired of just watching. Darren's blood ran cold. Another Milo? Yes, he said there was a boy who looked like him but wasn't him, and that this boy lived inside the bedroom wall, always listening, always waiting for the chance to come out. Darren returned to Lucia's house one last time that day. When he entered, he found a fresh sheet of paper on the living room table. A note, written in a child's handwriting. Thanks for the hot chocolate, Mum. I went to play with the street kids. I'll be back before Christmas is over. But there were no other children on that street. Just too many memories and silence where there should be laughter. Darren slept poorly that night. The note left in the center of the room still lingered in his mind, like an invisible mosquito. It wasn't the work of a mind in denial. It was too new, too clear. Clean paper, blue pen, writing that trembled like a child's. He was certain Lucia hadn't written that. She hadn't even tried. What's more, there was fresh dirt on the soles of the shoes that stood by the door. An old child's sneaker not there on the first visit. The next day he returned to the street, this time with a different approach. No longer as a police officer on duty, but as a man trying to understand. He knocked on each door in turn, starting with the house next door to Lucia's, where an elderly couple lived, Grace and Herman Doyle. Herman greeted him at the gate, his expression weary. Grace didn't show up. She said she had the flu, but Darren noticed her peering cautiously through the half-open windows. Darren was direct. He asked about Milo, about 2013, about the mass mentioned in the newspaper. Herman rubbed his hands, then his neck. He avoided his gaze. That was a long time ago, he said. A long time ago. We were already old back then. But you remember, don't you? Darren insisted. Herman hesitated. I remember it was a bad time, not just because of the boy. A lot of things happened here. Fights between neighbors, animals that disappeared, lights flickering for no reason. Some people moved out in the middle of the night. Darren felt a chill in his stomach. Why? Because no one wanted to be next. Next to what, Mr. Doyle? But Herman remained silent. He said he had to go. He entered slowly and closed the door without locking it. At the next house, he found the strangest woman on the entire street. Her name was Clarissa Feldman. She stood alone, her hair white and almost blue, smelling of old flowers and disinfectant. The door was open as if she'd been expecting him. Darren asked for Milo. She smiled, a crooked, joyless smile. Ah, the boy who came back, he said. Then you know. I know, but I shouldn't know. No one should. There are things that the more you move them, the more they stick. And what is this thing? She looked around and in a barely audible whisper replied, collective memory, dear, and guilt. Everyone remembers, but no one wants to be the first to admit it. Darren didn't understand at first, but Clarissa went on. By then, everyone knew something was wrong. The children began to change. One of them told me, at 7, that she heard voices coming from the floor, another that the bathroom mirror winked at her when she was alone. One boy said he had another him living in the closet, and that sometimes the other one would come out and play in his place. And nobody did anything. We did what we could. We prayed, we called priests, we sent a letter to the city asking for the poles and wiring to be replaced. But the truth is, no one had the courage to face what it was. We prefer to call it a phase. A psychological problem, a childish thing. She then said something that stuck with Darren for the rest of the day. The neighborhood is so old. This street especially, it was built over something else. Some say it was an indigenous camp. Others say an orphanage burned down here in the 1940s. But it doesn't matter what it was. What matters is that there's something buried here that still breathes. Darren thanked her, but felt he needed more. He went to the city registry office and dug through old street records. Among the purchase and sale documents, he found something curious. 4 houses on the street, including Lucia's, originally belonged to a now defunct religious foundation. The name was difficult, and the documents were partially erased, but one reference caught his eye. St. Amelia Asylum, closed after an incident in 1949. In the library, he found more, an old newspaper clipping with the headline, "Inmates of the former St. Amelia disappear after a fire. The neighborhood goes silent." There was a photo of an old charred building and a handwritten caption, "The building will be demolished. A new residential street will be built on the land, Sycamore Street." Darren returned to the station with all this. He took the material to his immediate superior, Lieutenant Briggs, but when he mentioned the name Milo Hernandez, the reaction was unexpected. The lieutenant swallowed hard and looked away. "There is no such case, Cole." "What do you mean he doesn't exist?" "His mother is alive. There are people who remember. I have a recent note, a school record, newspaper records. What you have is a trap, and you need to let it go now." "But why? What are you afraid of?" Briggs took a deep breath, and without looking Darren in the eye, he replied that this will happen again. He got up and left the room. Darren felt a strange weight on his shoulders. It wasn't fear. It was the kind of weight that comes when everything around you seems to be bending over backward to hide something, as if the world wanted to stifle a truth at any cost. That night, he decided to do something unexpected. He entered Lucia's house again, using the key she had left for him. It was silent. She wasn't there. A note on the table read, "I went to the square with him. I wanted to show him the Christmas lights." Darren went upstairs to Milo's room and sat there, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours. And then something changed. The air grew colder. The lamp flickered once, and then the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. He stood up. Slowly, he opened the door. Nothing. He returned to the room, and on the bed was a new note, in a child's handwriting. "You hear it too, right? Now you understand. He doesn't want to play just with me anymore." Darren left the house, his heart pounding. He started the car, but it wouldn't start. He stood there, staring at the houses in silence, every window blacked out, every curtain drawn, every neighbor pretending the world was still normal, but it wasn't anymore, and maybe it never would have been. The silence inside the police car seemed heavier than usual. Darren stood with the engine off, his fingers on the steering wheel, looking in the rearview mirror as if hoping to see something that would confirm he was still in the real world. But nothing appeared. Only his own breathing mingled with the distant blare of a siren. That last note, he didn't want to accept it. He didn't want to give it any reason, but he couldn't deny it anymore. Not after everything I'd seen. He decided it was time to do what he'd been avoiding all along, go to Lucia's basement. She wasn't there that night. The door remained unlocked, as if she knew he would return. Darren walked through the house with firm steps, but his stomach was tight. When he reached the door that led to the basement, he realized he had never opened it before. The handle was cold. The air rising through the cracks smelled of old mold and damp iron. He turned on the flashlight. The light flickered unsteady, but it was enough. Step by step he went down. The floor was rough cement, peeling walls, exposed pipes. In the far corner, covered by old boxes and a faded brown blanket, was a small, padlocked metal cabinet. Darren found the key inside a cup on a bookshelf. He opened it. Inside there was only a shoebox, with children's objects stored with a care that hurt. A pencil drawing, a lovingly folded blue sock, a broken button from a school shirt, and a cassette tape. The date, written in black marker on the side, 12/21/2013, 2 days before the mass registration, 2 days after the disappearance. Darren swallowed hard. On the shelf next to it was an old portable recorder, the kind that ran on batteries. He inserted the tape. The first attempt failed. The sound stuttered, but when he tapped the device lightly and turned the volume knob, the hissing subsided and the tape began to play. Silence for a few seconds. Then, the sound of breathing, and Lucia's voice, young but trembling. Milo, is that really you?" Break. And then, A childish voice answered, "It's me, Mom," but something about the intonation wasn't right. It was a thin, almost soft voice, yet artificial, as if it were an imitation, as if someone were trying to speak with a child's mouth but getting the rhythm and the pauses wrong. Every sentence seemed memorized. "Where have you been, my love? I've been looking for you everywhere. I thought I'd lost you. I was here, I was waiting, you just weren't listening to me." The tape crackled, there was a louder hiss. Are you hungry? Do you want hot chocolate? Try. Break. Do you still love me? Of course I do, Milo. You're my son, my boy. More hissing. And then the voice answered, "Even though I'm the one inside the wall?" Darren almost dropped the device. The recorder continued, now with muffled sounds, like footsteps and the scraping of chairs. "You don't belong anywhere, my love. You are my son. He said he would come back, but he never did, so I took his place." The tape sped up, as if someone had accidentally pressed the button. Then, more silence, and finally, the woman's voice, alone, crying, "I will take care of you. It doesn't matter who you are. I will take care of you." The final click of the tape sounded like a punch in the dark. Darren stood still, staring at the recorder, as if waiting for another voice to emerge, but nothing happened. The tape had ended. He rewound. He listened to it all over again. Then a third time. Each time, the words took on new weight. "Even though I'm the one inside the wall." There was something deeply wrong there. That recording wasn't a record of longing, it was a pact, an acknowledgement of something that shouldn't be there, a presence taking the place of an absence. Darren took the tape with him. He wouldn't hand it over to the police station. Not after the lieutenant's reaction. He knew if he did, the tape would disappear just like Milo's case did. The next morning, he decided to visit one more person, the only one he hadn't faced yet, the retired janitor at the school Milo attended. Carlos Nunez, now nearly 80, lived in a simple house on the outskirts of Inglewood. At the mention of the school and the name Milo, the old man opened the door, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Without a word, he pointed to the armchair. Darren sat down. "He's back, isn't he?" Carlos asked. Darren nodded. Carlos took out a manila envelope and handed it to him. Inside were 3 pencil drawings, scribbled by childish hands. Each one showed a boy with 2 faces. One was smiling, the other was crying. On the back of each page was a name, Milo, the boy behind the mirror. "It's not me. The kids used to draw this during recess. I found these papers in the playground. Days before he disappeared, I took them to the principal. Nobody did anything. You know what they said? That it was a phase." Darren looked at the drawings. One showed the boy's face splitting in half, like an eggshell. The director, after that, started acting strange, and a week later, she asked for a transfer. She disappeared. Carlos pointed to the recorder Darren was carrying in his backpack. "You've heard it, right?" Darren nodded again. "That's not him. That never was." He left with the feeling of being weighed down by lead. He returned to Lucia's house. She was in the garden as if nothing had happened. She was combing her hair, sitting in an antique chair, looking up at the grey sky. "You heard, didn't you?" she asked without turning her face. "Yes, and I need to know why. Why did you accept him? Why do you feed this?" She closed her eyes for a few seconds. Then she replied, "Because for a few minutes I had my son back." Darren felt like screaming, but he didn't have the strength. "And now?" She got up from her chair slowly, her eyes filled with tears. "Now he's here in everything, in the smells, in the sounds, in the walls. He never left. And if you listen to the tape, maybe he'll never leave you either." Darren didn't come home that Christmas. He sat in the car until the sky began to lighten. The city was waking slowly, unhurriedly, as if trying to forget the previous night had happened, as if the next morning could erase the unanswered questions. The cassette tape was tucked away in the glove compartment. The children's drawings were folded in his jacket pocket, and the sound of the voice, that childish voice that wasn't childish, still spun around in his head like scratched vinyl, insistent, uncomfortable. It would never leave him again. But what to do with all that? If she reported it, perhaps the story would come to light, and along with it, Mrs. Lucia, who had committed no crime, but who would become the face of a madness no one wanted to see. If she remained silent, she would be overlooking something that perhaps deserved to be told. There was no physical evidence to support it all, only fragments, pieces of a truth that no one, absolutely no one, was prepared to hear. On the morning of the 25th, a brown envelope was left at the police station door. No sender, no stamp, just simple, almost childlike handwriting. "Thank you for listening to me. He's fine now." Darren read it 3 times. The handwriting resembled the first letter, but there was something different, firmer, as if whatever was behind those words had found peace, or faked it very well. He tucked the note into his pocket. He didn't keep it for record. He didn't tell anyone. And as strange as it seemed, in that moment, He felt that story had come to an end. Days later, he returned to Lucia's house. There was no one else. The door was locked, the windows were closed. The garden was beginning to die, abandoned. The neighbors said she had moved suddenly. No moving truck, no warning. She disappeared the same way her son had 12 years before. Darren tried to track down some records, bank, hospital, anything. But again, her name began disappearing from the systems. Her phone number was deactivated. Her medical records were transferred to an inactive file. Not even her water or electricity bills were linked to her CPF, Brazilian Social Security number. It was as if she too had ceased to exist, and perhaps it did. He returned to the house one last time, one January afternoon. He forced the lock and entered. The smell was different. Cold. Dead. There was nothing. No furniture. No paintings, no mugs on the table. Milo's room was empty, as if it had never been a child's room. Just plain white walls. No poster marks, no shadows of shelves. Darren walked to the middle of the room and stood there, listening. Nothing. No wind, no creaking, not even the sound of one's own footsteps. When he left the house, he carried only the tape in his pocket, and a weight he couldn't explain to anyone. In the months that followed, Darren returned to his normal work. Regular cases, robberies, bar fights, domestic incidents, but something inside him had changed. He could hear better now. Silences, too. Reactions that had previously seemed subtle now screamed. He began to notice absences where no one else saw anything. He began to understand that denial is sometimes the only way the mind finds to keep breathing, because not every truth needs to be told. Some, when discovered, do not free anyone. They drag. And maybe, just maybe, Lucia knew this all along. She didn't want justice. She wanted to say goodbye. And somehow, inexplicably, it did. Darren never spoke about the affair to anyone again. But every now and then, deep in the car, inside the glove compartment, he hears something fall, as if the tape on its own decided to remind him it was still there. He never listens. Just take a deep breath, put it in gear, and keep going. If stories like this captivate you, make you think, or even give you goosebumps, maybe it's time to stick around. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned, because there's a lot that hasn't been told yet, and some of it perhaps you'll only find here